Hello, my name is MD from Wiyobio, and I wanted to talk about my experience at FIU and things that I wish I knew before I attended the university. For context about my application, I am a Miami native. I've been to school in Miami, Florida my entire life, so I'm very near the university. I already came to the university with credits from college because I did the dual enrollment program at my previous high school, and I graduated with a 3.8 GPA. When I was sending in my application, I applied as a computer science Bachelor of Arts, and then I switched to a Bachelor's of Science, which I will get into that. So for the application process, this is filmed in 2025. I was applying for the 2024 through 2025 cycle starting in August of 2024. I don't know if things have changed by the time somebody's watching this video, but basically when I had sent in my application for my computer science degree, you are not required to send in an essay. Maybe for specific programs you are, because for instance, my sister, I know she applied for nursing and she had to send in some sort of essay, so it could be different depending on the program. For me, if you're applying for computer science, you do not need to, from my knowledge and my cycle. And you have to send in your transcript from your prior schools, pretty typical of any university application. You don't need a recommendation letter. And I think I heard back about 3 or 4 weeks after. I could be wrong, I don't entirely remember. But that was pretty much the entire process. It's actually very easy. And then they'll ask you questions such as, oh, are your parents alumni? And very typical questions. It's not a difficult process at all. So that's actually one thing that I really liked about FIU, is that the application process is very easy and quick, and you can get it done in literally like 15 minutes or so. Also, on the application process, you can put a second major, or what would be your second option, I believe. For me, I put my second option as being a degree in computer science Bachelor of Arts, and my first choice was computer science with a degree in the Bachelor of Science. So for specific programs, there are prerequisite courses. So I think what had happened in my case is initially they put that I had not met the prerequisites, but afterwards when I met with my counselor, because you are going to meet with a counselor when you get accepted into the university, and when I got accepted and I met with my counselor, she changed it from Bachelor of Arts to Bachelor's of Science. So I'm not sure entirely why I didn't initially fit into the Bachelor of Science program, but I guess that's something to take into consideration, is sometimes you may not get accepted into a specific program, especially if you're applying for BS, because maybe there's a math prerequisite that you're missing, or some sort of other course that is required. It could be physics or some sort of lab. That usually is the case when it's a Bachelor's of Science in a STEM course especially, or STEM major. But you can switch out of it once you either speak to your counselor about it and she'll explain to you why you don't meet the prerequisite, or they can change it for you if there was some sort of miscalculation. Because for me, I just explained that I wanted to go into my Bachelor's of Science as opposed to a BA, and she said, oh, you're eligible for this, and she changed it for me. But I'm not entirely sure what was the case in my situation, so that's just something to keep in mind. If you're wondering what's the difference between the Bachelor's of Arts and Bachelor's of Science, so this is just from what I've gathered and from what I believe and from my experience, is, let's say for instance you want to have a Bachelor of Arts in computer science, you will take less math heavy courses. I don't believe the physics class is required, and also in the BS for computer science, you are placed into a capstone program, and for a BA in computer science, you do not need to do the capstone program. The capstone program, I just completed capstone 1, is where you do a project with other people of your major. I actually thoroughly enjoyed my Capstone 1 project, so I personally feel very grateful for the opportunity to have done my BS in computer science as opposed to my BA, but I think if you're somebody who doesn't want to take classes that are as math heavy and have as many prerequisites in terms of STEM, then the Bachelor of Arts would be more suited for what you want to do. In terms of cost, if you are a Florida student or a Florida native, you may have heard of the Bright Future Scholarship, which essentially can pay for 100% of your college tuition if you reach a certain SAT score, a certain GPA, as well as a number of community service hours. There's a 100% one as well as a 75% one. And that is only applicable to students who are residents of the state of Florida. This is not applicable to international students, unfortunately. But one thing that I believe people don't talk enough about is the fact that there are not just those scholarships. There's not just the academic scholarship, the Bright Future Scholarship. There's actually the presidential scholarship, and there are several others that have to do with not just financial need, but also merit, and ones that are solely on merit. And of course, there's also FAFSA, which I think that's how you pronounce it, which is something that is universal for every institution, not just FIU, and given a specific number of need, they will provide you with a tuition that is affordable for you. So I strongly recommend you fill out the FAFSA if you don't meet the other requirements. All right, in terms of selectivity, I would say, now this is completely my opinion, but it's also from personal experience because of the people who I know who attend FIU and the people who have gotten into FIU or have had a difficult time getting into FIU. On average, it is pretty doable to get accepted as long as you are not completely failing high school to the point that you're barely graduating. That maybe you have not so good of a chance, but overall, it's not very selective, I would say. However, the one program that I've heard of that is very selective, that does not apply to what I just said, is the nursing program. So in the nursing program, they have a limited number of students that they accept every year, and it's a very small number, and you need to submit your essay. And I know for that program in specific, it's very selective. You have to have basically a 4.0 GPA, which again, I know applications are holistic, but the point that I'm trying to make is do not go apply for FIU to the nursing program assuming that it's just going to be very easy to get in, because that is definitely not the accurate truth when it comes to applying to the nursing program in specific, because of how competitive nursing as a whole is. And I think that's maybe the truth for a lot of institutions, especially FIU though. So that's one thing that I wish people were more upfront about, is that the nursing program is very, very selective. Overall though, I think it ultimately depends on your prerequisites and your GPA. Just make sure that you're a student who's not failing, right? So it's not like an Ivy League institution where you need to have all these accolades or anything. Just be a decent person. If you're almost failing high school, or you know for a fact that you are just not a good student, or you did not do well in high school, then what I would suggest is consider going to a college first and then transferring to a four-year institution. So what a lot of people who want to go to FIU do, they'll do 2 years at Miami-Dade College and they will transfer into FIU, which is a very good idea, especially because FIU specifically has a transfer program and transfer agreement with MDC. So a lot of the students who go to MDC can directly transfer into FIU, and they also have the majority of their classes, if not all of their classes and their credits from MDC, actually transfer over FIU, which can be a concern for going into other institutions or other universities. Sometimes your credits won't transfer over, but I can tell you for a fact that if you go to MDC, they will 100% transfer into FIU. Okay, course registration. So, FIU is a very big school. There are a lot of students who go to it, and for that reason, course registration can be very stressful and very difficult if you do not do it on time or if you do not do it early, because everybody's trying to get in those classes, especially if you are a freshman and there are those generic classes that pretty much everyone needs to take, like college algebra, for instance, or ENC 1101, ENC 1102, those types of classes, or a bunch of intro courses can be very difficult to get into, and you can run the risk of not being able to get into any of them for your first semester, which makes it more difficult to graduate on time. So definitely register early because there are so many people who register. If you go on your My FIU portal, there's also a feature that allows you to see what specific classes you need to take for your major, and you can also speak with your advisor. And for your first semester, you are required to meet with your advisor anyways, so they will give you a rundown of the pathway that you need to take and the courses that you need to take. Personally, I've never had an issue with my advisor. However, I know that for some people, maybe they've had stressful experiences. I just personally cannot relate to that. So the best advice that I could truly give is just definitely register for your classes early, check your course pathway. You can search up the classes you need to take yourself, and you can put course pathway FIU, and there will be some sort of visual that will show you the classes that you need to take exactly. And you can also see it on your My FIU portal, which requirements you've met and which ones you have not. So you can definitely also do it yourself. Just be very careful because there is a cost for excess credits that you would have to pay if you are taking too many classes or you're attempting too many credits. So definitely be vigilant about the classes you're supposed to take. I wanted to have a section where I just talk about the first week of classes because, man, the first week of classes will definitely be an experience for you because there are so many people. There are going to be times in the first week where you just can barely walk through the hallways because it's so crowded. And it can be very fun in that sense because you're seeing so many people, but also you have to be aware of that because especially if you're trying to find a specific class or you're lost and you've never been to the campus, it can be very overwhelming to be surrounded by so many people and feel like you're crowded. So yeah, that's something that's going to be very noticeable on the first week. But of course, as the weeks start to go by, you will notice that the campus isn't as full because people stop showing up for their classes. So it's not bad all the time. And also, I think you get used to it for the most part when there's so many people. But it can be annoying in the sense that if you want to study on the library, if you want to study in the library, such as the Green Library, it's going to be very difficult to find study spaces at the MMC campus because there's so many people. In this video, I'm going to be speaking a lot about MMC because that's where I attended pretty much every class that I took. I only visited BBC once, and it wasn't for a course, it was for an event that they held there, so I don't know much about the atmosphere at BBC, other than MMC is very large, whereas BBC is not as much at all. It's a very different environment, so just keep that in mind when I'm saying all these things, that everything that I'm discussing right now predominantly is about MMC, especially when it comes to campus life and socials and all of that fun stuff. But it's the same institution, it's just different classes. There are basically three institutions. So there's MMC, Modesto Medique campus, which is essentially the main campus, the largest one. Then near that campus, literally like 5 minutes in terms of driving, I believe, there is the engineering center, which is where engineering students have their classes. There is also a recent building that was created for computer science students, which makes me upset because I didn't get to experience it when I was in person in Miami because I don't live in Miami right now. But apparently it just opened. but unfortunately I cannot speak about that specific one because I wasn't taking classes when that campus was opened, or not that campus, that building was opened. But anyways, there's MMC, the Engineering Center, there's the new building that opened for computer science students, and there's also BBC campus, Biscayne Bay campus, which is located in Biscayne Bay. In this video, I will be talking mostly about MMC when it comes to social life and the atmosphere, the events, all of the in-person things of FIU, because that is where I attended classes. What I will say is MMC is a lot larger, so if you want that university experience more so, then you would probably enjoy Sweetwater more, which is where the MMC campus is located. Whereas Biscayne Bay campus is a lot smaller, so it's not as many students, but also some people prefer that because it's not as crowded. If you are an engineering student, it will also be a little more difficult to have those activities and social experiences because most of your classes, if not all of your classes, will be located within the engineering center, which is slightly isolated from MMC. Let's talk about food. At FIU, specifically MMC, what I love so much is the fact that there are a variety of food options that you can get. There are so many restaurants and so many stores either in MMC or nearby it, so finding food will never be an issue. And there's also the dining pass because they have this student dining area. I've gone there many times. I love the food there. They're always picking different options and they provide breakfast, lunch, and dinner. However, what I will say is it is very busy, especially when it's the fall semester, especially when it is the first few weeks of classes, so it may be difficult being able to have some alone time there because so many students are in the dining area. But I do strongly recommend it. I actually really loved the food. Again, of course, I'm speaking out of my personal experience, but I found it to be very enjoyable. I never had an issue finding food because there is so much access to food and water and a lot of good stuff anytime that you're having a craving. There's also some coffee machines that are near campus, and there's also this place called Moon Empanadas or something like that, and that place is also good, I would say, but it's a little expensive for a college student, so you definitely need to budget. But I do strongly recommend the dining pass because there's so much food that you can get there, and it's buffet style, so you can just keep getting food. So yeah, food is definitely not an issue at FIU. If you are a student who is international, then you will either have to live on campus within the dormitories or in the off-campus apartments. If you are planning on living in the dormitories on campus, what I will say is that they fill up very quickly. If you want to be able to have access to the dormitories before anybody else, then you should apply for the Honors College because there is a specific building on campus that is designated for honors students, and honors students do get priority over everyone else. So I would strongly recommend you apply for the Honors College and see if you get accepted because there are definitely perks with that. If you do not get accepted and you cannot live on campus, there are also the off-campus apartments. And what I will say about those buildings, honestly, is that it is very controversial. If you look at the reviews for some of the buildings, you will notice that some of them are very good, some of them are very bad. I specifically did live in one of the off-campus apartments. I lived at the one. If you see the reviews of the one on Google, you will see that it is very controversial. There are a lot of people who speak negatively about the one, and honestly, I could probably make another video about that building in my personal opinion. But what I will say, and I don't want to get hate on this because this is just my personal experience, and for context, I lived in a studio apartment, so I did not live with roommates. When I first got into the apartment, I did have an infestation of cockroaches, okay? It was very bad, and I got someone to fumigate the place. But after that very bad issue, which, yes, I was freaking out, but fortunately, I'm from Miami, so I just went back to my parents' house. But after that situation, I never had that happen again, and for me, I had a pretty great time. The only one thing that I noticed was the constant college student smell. I don't think I can say it without getting in trouble by social media. I don't know. I don't want to risk that, but it's just typical college student thing. But anyways, I'll probably insert something that alludes to it. But anyways, that was one thing. But I had a great experience in the sense that I was able to do my own thing. I studied there, I lived there, and I like how close it is to campus. I personally think the building's very nice. Of course, there are some issues, which are things that have to do with hygiene. So sometimes you'll be in the elevator and there'll be like dog poop or something like that. The elevators break sometimes, but overall, I think it's livable. However, it is pricey. It is very pricey, and I do think that they should lower the cost because it's not as luxury as it's advertised to be. But maybe things have changed, I'm not sure, but I do know a lot of people who do not like the one. I'm not sure about the other buildings because I didn't live in the other buildings, but you should check it out for yourself, look at the pricing, and definitely consider it. But if that is not doable, then what I would say is probably consider either living with somebody who is in Miami, who's a student there, finding other apartments nearby. But it is, in terms of housing, there's not many options other than the limited dormitories on campus at FIU and the off-campus apartments, and that's pretty much it. So definitely try to figure out the living arrangements as soon as you can so that you're not stuck going to FIU and you have nowhere to go. That would be pretty bad. Sororities and fraternities. I was never involved with any sorority or fraternity. The one time that I was slightly involved when I tried out for one or attempted to get recruited was when I was trying out Phi Sigma Rho, which is a sorority for women in STEM, women who are engineers. So it's not the typical sorority. So if you're thinking about going to the university and you want to know how sorority and fraternity life is in FIU, I have to disclose that I was not part of a sorority, so I cannot speak firsthand. However, I will say from what I've seen, there are a lot of sororities and a lot of fraternities, and there are a bunch of people who are involved in that life, so that definitely exists. It's not the typical experience of living in a house because FIU doesn't have like designated houses for sororities and fraternities, at least from what I've seen. They do not have that, but I don't know, I could be wrong, but I don't think that they have that because FIU isn't that typical of a university in that sense, which I'll also do an overview of what I mean by that. But yeah, there's a lot of people who do join sororities and do a lot of events that sororities and fraternities typically do, but I guess that is one thing to keep in mind is that they don't have this big house like you'll see in other big state universities. So it's not, I guess, as lively as other universities, such as like, I don't know, FSU maybe. So that's something to consider. However, they do put on a lot of events for themselves. I've seen them do many things for charities and philanthropies, which I think is pretty cool. They do the whole big and little thing. So it's something that you can definitely check out. And I will say when I was on campus in the fall semester when they were recruiting, I saw many people in the recruiting process, so it is a popular thing. And also when you enter the university, you will see that on the wall they have the Greek letters for all of the sororities and fraternities, so it is advertised in that sense that there is that Greek life, so you can get involved with it, and there's definitely opportunities to have fun. So I don't want the appearance to be that FIU doesn't have a Greek life, because it actually very much does, and I know a lot of people who are involved in Greek life. Sports. So FIU has several sports teams, right? Competitive sports teams. I'm going to briefly speak about the college football. So one thing that very big state universities have is they'll have a lot of football spirit where they go to the stadium and like they support the football players and they go all out and all crazy for their football players. FIU, at least in the recording of this video, not very much like that at all, other than the first week of classes. I've noticed that a lot of people go to the first football game. It's pretty traditional to do that, but then they end up not going to the other games, so it's definitely not as crowded or as full as you're going to see in big state universities. That's one thing. And in terms of their winning streak, so when I was at university specifically, there is a previous coach who, I don't know the drama behind this, but he's not a coach there anymore. But I'm not sure if they were winning. From what I remember, they were not. They were on a losing streak. But now with the new coach, they actually did win the first game of the season, which was pretty cool. Unfortunately, I didn't get to go, but yeah, the football spirit isn't as lively as other schools, but it's definitely present. And I think one thing that I admire about FIU now is you can definitely see that they're promoting that social life and they're giving those students the opportunity to be invested in that fiesta and have fun. So I really appreciate that, and I do believe that over time, the football presence and the social culture of FIU is going to expand dramatically. There's also the Pitbull Stadium. So Pitbull did sponsor our stadium, which is pretty cool. And I remember the first year when I was in the fall semester, when I went to the first football game, there was this guy who was an old person and everybody thought he was Pitbull, so everybody was taking photos of him. So that was pretty funny. And I do strongly suggest, if you go to FIU, to not miss out on First Night, which is an event that they do for the first day of classes, where at night they do all these events within the Pitbull Stadium, which is very big, and I think it looks pretty nice. And all the clubs will be there advertising their events and what they have to offer, so it definitely provides you with that social experience, and it makes you feel very much like a university experience, and it's something that you'll take away with you, hopefully, when you attend FIU. I'm not personally that involved with the sports at FIU, and I do not keep up too much with FIU sports. However, I've heard a lot of good things about their female soccer team. I've seen that they have been winning a lot, so I guess we do have pretty good sports in that regard. But other than that, I'm not too familiar with the sports, and I don't think in comparison to other universities there is a strong sports culture. It's not like a football heavy school, at least not yet. There is a large presence of clubs at Florida International University, which I thought was surprising when I was applying, because I just assumed that, oh, because it's a commuter school, that there probably isn't going to be as many clubs, but there are several clubs that you can be involved in. One of my favorite clubs, because I was a computer science major, was INIT. I also liked Code Crunch, I liked Women in Computer Science, and they also have an esports club as well as Game Hers, which is a gaming club for women specifically, which I thought was pretty cool. So there's definitely a lot that you can get yourself involved into. I just specifically mentioned the computer science related clubs because I was a computer science major. But I've also seen a lot of presence with other clubs. One club that comes to mind is the acapella group, because I'm always seeing their content on social media and they go to singing competitions and it looks pretty fun. There's also the UN club. The UN club is I think it's MUN, sorry, I just like United Nations. The MUN club is very popular because they have gotten world recognition because of how good they are at competitions. So definitely, if you're into Model UN, you are going to love that club, and that is definitely something that is very noticeable on campus. as well as the presence of a lot of organizations related to pre-law or pre-medical field or pre-nursing, stuff like that. You will see that a lot. And of course, the technology groups at FIU. There are so many. I'm actually going to make a video specifically about my experience at FIU as a computer science student and what there is at FIU and what I like and what I don't like. But yes, there are so many clubs that you could just have fun with and participate in. Alright, for the academics. For me, I really loved my computer science classes. I loved my computer science professors. I thought that they were very helpful and they are there for you when you need them, especially during office hours, which I don't think people take advantage of enough. So I would say try to take advantage of that if you can. There's also a lot of services for tutoring. So the Green Library, they offer tutoring services. You can also, again, go to office hours. You can speak to the teaching assistants, the learning assistants, and they will be there for you. So the difference between a TA and an LA, so the LAs are undergraduate students who are helping in the class, and then the TAs are graduate students, so master's level students, basically. They have always been very helpful for me, but I think the most helpful thing for me has been going to office hours and speaking to the professors directly. And I think also doing that allows the professor to get to know you a little bit and provide you with the help that you need and possibly even connections for your field. I definitely didn't cover everything, but I don't want to make this video too long in the editing process, so I'm going to see how short I can make this video so that it's not too boring, and I probably will make a part 2 for the things that I didn't miss, or if I get any specific questions, I'll answer those questions to the best of my ability. I am planning on making a video specific to being a computer science student at FIU and what I liked and what I didn't like, and also my tips for excelling at FIU. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you really did, please give me a follow because I will probably be posting things about my educational experience, specific things about AI policy because that's something that interests me, and also just documenting my university life as I go on to finish my bachelor's and then hopefully get a graduate degree and so forth. So yeah, alright, my name is Amdia and I'm ending the video. Alright, bye.